So, as he just introduced us, Brian is the head of product at Random House. And I thought a great place to start would be to understand what does that actually mean?
Yeah, it's a great question because in reality our products are books that we publish, but for me what that means and for my team is actually how do we market our books and authors at scales using technology. So we sit in a corporate consumer marketing group, and practically speaking, it means a host of websites where consumers can come and learn about our authors and books and buy them. We have some native apps, so if you're a Game of Thrones fan, we publish that. There's a companion app. We have a voice skill out there that takes audio snippets from our audiobooks, specifically sort of self-help and motivational books, and would send you like a 30-second quote every day from a celebrity author. So lots of fun things. And then another facet of my team builds out marketing tools for the hundreds of marketers in our company. It's really about, just elevating our product, learning from consumers, and trying to develop a relationship with them. Since we're actually, I should have said this at the start, primarily a B2B company. If you think about it, we sell our books to major retailers. So we're really trying to learn more about the consumer space and have a relationship with them.
Cool, thank you for that. And I know, you wouldn't necessarily think Penguin House and product together, but that makes a lot of sense. You're trying to develop a relationship with your customers and use digital products to do that.
Yeah.
And I think it would be helpful to understand, how did you actually arrive at this role? What was your journey to arrive at this position? Because I know people here, I'm sure, are thinking for themselves, how do I get into that type of role? How do I become a head of product?
Yeah, sure. It definitely wasn't a linear path for me. It's similar, in fact, to some origin stories I've heard in the past. I actually started my career as a journalist. My first job out of school was actually at Time Inc. I worked for People.com in the newsroom there. It just was happenstance that I was watching sort of this website develop all around me in the early days and had the opportunity, kind of just by luck, to participate in scoping kind of native mobile apps in a sort of cross-functional way. Didn't really understand what product was as a discipline, didn't have a name for it, couldn't really articulate that, but got really involved in essentially thinking through major things like product market fit, defining a value proposition for apps that didn't exist at the time, because at that point we had People magazine, which was sold at a subscription basis, and then we had a free website that was ad monetized. So I was trying to figure out a new revenue stream for the company, and that just kind of got me excited because I was frankly feeling burnt out on the news cycle, and it opened my eyes to something that was really collaborative and tapped into, I think, just areas of curiosity that I was excited about. So from there, I was like, okay, how do I figure this out? How do I move forward? Which happy to talk more about. Or
how did you move forward? I think it's a cliffhanger.
Yeah, totally. Come back next week. It's a good question. So I, basically started to apply myself, ask a lot of questions, listen in, poke my head into every conversation, with developers. It wasn't something that was like super technical. I was really, the editorial stakeholder in that product build, but I was like, okay, I want to understand, this work stream and how this function works. So really just trying to make myself sort of available to everything, and then, just doing independent research myself. And then I had the opportunity, my next role, I went to ABC News, and I played this sort of unique and hybrid role where I was sitting in the newsroom, so I felt very comfortable because I understood sort of how those stakeholders worked. I understood the business model, but I was really kind of a liaison between the product and engineering groups, and I got the opportunity to own kind of really key features in their mobile apps and an early Apple TV app. And so my role was basically trying to operationalize, sort of what the product vision was, and build out different workflows. I can be more specific, it's probably helpful. One key feature was like a push notification feature in the mobile app. So really figuring out like, what does that mean? What does that look like? How does that get built into like the CMS that the journalists are using to actually functionally send messages? And on some level too, like what would the end consumer want to see? But we could talk more about that. I think that was a real area of eye-opening growth area for me at that stage in my career.
We'll come back to that part.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you were in journalism and then you moved into product. And so do you feel like some of the skills you developed in journalism informed the product role that you had, and kind of how do you see the link between those two manifest itself?
Yeah, definitely. I think, it's come up on a handful of panels, and I know I mentioned it yesterday, but I think like really the storytelling aspect is key research. My training as a journalist taught me that I needed to basically go find out what's going on and gather information from a multitude of sources to really have a robust picture, a well-rounded picture. And then you need to distill that down into something that's really concise and clear and tell that story to a wide audience so they can comprehend it. So just that like sort of kernel, I think really informs a lot of what we do, especially because from that point on, I'd always basically been in consumer-facing product, and so I really view my role, my team's role, as understanding the consumer need, empathizing with them, articulating, being their voice in the conversation while thinking about how to balance, kind of key business objectives that our companies have, but ensuring that at the end of the day, if we want something to be successful, we're building based on a real consumer need, that we can validate it's out there. And so, yeah, it all kind of comes back to seeking understanding, I think, for me.
Right, so like understanding the customer with the story you need to be telling internally and how to kind of mesh those two.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And just to take a step back to the role for a second, I think it would be helpful to understand, how many PMs do you manage? Like how big is the org? How many products are there?
Yeah.
Just to get a picture of that.
Sure. When I started, so I've been at the company now for 5 years. It was a team of 3, me and I had 2 direct reports. Now we're a team of, I think 12 or 13, just on the product side. And I should mention too that we moved email marketing as a function is sort of, the corporate one is under me because we've invested a lot in our personalization efforts in email, and we wanted to really own a 360-degree view of the consumer because like I was mentioning before, a lot of what we're doing is really trying to develop that relationship. And so if we can understand your motivations, what you're interested in, the kinds of books you're interested in, we can serve better recommendations. And then when you click through to the website, and I should mention too, we have a loyalty program. There's a lot of fun stuff going on. So that's really sort of developed over time. So I've been able to expand my team. We have 4 primary agile teams that are resourced, with sort of traditional compositions of engineers, design and UX. We have shared horizontal services, so analytics, marketers that help from like a product marketing perspective and build creative campaigns. Our sales org are stakeholders as well. So yeah, all told, there's probably about 45 or so folks involved in all of those agile teams, and on the product side, it's about 11 or 12.
Cool. So can you speak to also kind of what drove that growth? Because that seems pretty significant. Was it, the amount of consumers you guys were reaching, or just more products coming into your fold? Are you thinking about and creating new products from scratch? How did that actually work?
Yeah, I think that as our reach continued to grow, it became clear that we needed to build up the discipline within the company because we're a fairly decentralized company, and so we really wanted to have a comprehensive view of what our digital footprint looked like in general. And so it just meant the portfolio expanded quite a bit. So for instance, I mentioned the marketing tools that we built. We have hundreds of marketers in the company who are responsible for working on an individual book day to day. And so that's really their primary focus. So one of the strategies for my team was to kind of enable growth and empower them. And so certainly, this came up yesterday, do you go out of house? Do you buy something or license it? And we have those conversations all the time. But strategically, it was really important for us to build a platform that allowed them to build like campaign landing pages, run sweepstakes, things like that. So we could keep all of the data secure in-house and leverage it. There weren't equitable sort of resources like design resources shared across the board. So if we could build something, sort of turnkey for them, they would adopt it and use it and not go off and do things that may be outside of what we'd want to see from a corporate sort of security or compliance perspective, and also help them from like a sort of digital best practices perspective too. So things like that just kind of organically came up, and it was like, oh yeah, we need somebody to sort of be an expert in tools and come in and do that. Or we developed a loyalty program a few years ago that rewards consumers from purchasing our books from any retailer. And so we needed to bring on an OCR vendor to do receipt scanning. So we needed somebody to sort of understand that. So part of it is just organically seeing sort of that growth as
Cool. No, that's really helpful. And I have more questions about the role itself,
Yeah.
but I think it'll be helpful to the audience to see and learn from you and what you kind of has set you apart in your career, especially given the title. So what do
Yeah.
you think your competitive advantage in your product career has been?
Yeah, I would say for me, it probably goes back to what I said before, my training, thinking about, really trying to ask good questions, really listening, asking a lot of questions, but, appropriately, I would say, and following up there. I think focusing on the customer is also really big, but if I had to pick one, I would say it's about like crafting the right question and sort of listening. But I'm curious about yours
Oh,
as well.
about me?
I feel like the focus.
Yeah, sorry.
No, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, definitely it would have to be my relentlessness. And so being a startup founder, one of the things that you're going to have to do is just like look like an idiot a lot of the time and be willing to fail or just completely get it wrong. And I think the quicker you get it wrong, the quicker you get it right. So not being afraid to put something out there that you don't know how it's going to turn out is the most important thing that I think has differentiated myself and allowed me to be successful in building this company. And for those who didn't see me an hour ago, I had a company called Bowtie. It was an AI receptionist that I scaled with my team. Eventually sold it to a company called MindBody. It's a beauty, wellness, fitness booking and scheduling and POS app. And now I'm working on a new company called Mesh, which is a way for people to send overlaid video communications and guides to customers, and it makes you feel like you're on a Zoom call with someone when you're not there. So that's just a little bit about me. To take the spotlight away from you for a second.
minute. And it all sounds so exciting, and I feel like as somebody who's always worked in mid or larger sized companies, I feel like it seems so inspiring and very like fulfilling and all of that to be sort of generating all of these ideas and working in the startup culture. And I just find myself to be somewhat so risk averse sometimes that like I've never been able to take that plunge, but maybe
it's never
someday.
too late.
Yeah, maybe someday.
Especially with your expertise now. But actually, in terms of getting it right, I did want to hear about a time that you kind of struggled or you were surprised by what you learned in that product journey, like if you have any kind of specifics that came to mind there.
I think, there's opportunities hopefully to learn new things and learn from mistakes all the time, no matter where you are in your career. But early on, going back to that role at ABC News, I think this was a really good lesson I learned. It was foundational for me because, as I was saying, I was at the time responsible for operationalizing some product strategy, contributing to it, but really, helping to kind of more execute, right? Like, how do we make this happen? And so I don't think I had the presence of mind at the time, definitely not the experience to ask really fundamental questions that I would insist upon now with my team, which is really like getting to the heart of like, why are we doing this? What problem are we trying to solve? Very foundational things. Who's the intended audience? Is this what they're looking for? So in the case of this push notification strategy, the idea was how do we develop something that engaged consumers such that they would want to open our general news app multiple times a day. I think reality is, we had video content there that we were monetizing through ads to like get people to open more, but also there's a real service there, especially for people who are interested in breaking news. The news cycles are relentless. But I didn't really think to ask like, why are we doing this for every piece of content in the app? Like, should we focus on one vertical? Like, do we know that people who are interested in politics might be more, this might be a more conducive feature for somebody who's following like a specific type of story? And instead I just kind of went off and, I think someone used the phrase boiled the ocean before. It was like, that's what we were trying to do. And we were able to implement something and learn from it, but I think it was a very involved process. And with the benefit of hindsight and what I know now, I think I would have tried to sharpen that, narrow the scope significantly, and understand why a lot quicker.
Right, so like starting small and then going from there.
Yeah.
And for me, actually, one of the things that we made a mistake on early with our product is we were focusing on solving our own problems and not so much the problems of the business owners we were selling to. So I kind of spoke to this earlier on a different panel, but more specifically when we were selling to restaurants, we were saying we were trying to make the experience easier for the consumer who was actually using the application. but they're not the ones paying you, right? So you really want to make sure you understand who you're developing your product for, who's the one who's actually opening their wallet, and like, are they the ones excited about the product? And once we did that, we shifted gears and ended up with a completely different product, which we ended up selling.
Totally. And what you were saying before too about, the loudest voice in the room, that's
Right.
also, I think, so instructive because that even happens internally. I mean, just going back to the example I shared, thinking about, okay, these people are very persuasive, right? They've told me that they've done all of this research, or this is like this great idea. And so I didn't even really think to question it, also because of less about hierarchy, but more just like, oh, okay, I didn't really, I just sort of went along with that.
Right,
because-
not taking things at face value and,
Yeah.
and doing your own validation.
Yep.
That makes sense. And so I wanted to shift gears to another area that I hope people can find value in, which is around what you look for in your team.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe just starting out with, when you're interviewing candidates, when you're looking for new PMs, as I hear you're growing, what are the types of things you're looking for?
Yeah, that's one of the things I love most, and I've really enjoyed in my role now is trying to grow the team. And a big piece of it for me is truly thinking about traits as opposed to like very specific, unique sets of experience. Mostly depending on the job, especially for more junior roles on the team. I'm really looking for general traits. Customer centricity, curiosity. To me, it doesn't matter if you've had like deep product experience, again, for certain roles, if you've worked in an adjacent function or, there are transferable skills. Part of it is about how do you tell the story about your own experience to me when we're meeting, so I can understand that, and the questions that you sort of ask back, because I think interviews often are hopefully conversations, just like I'm interviewing somebody, hopefully they're interviewing me too for the team. So just to speak generally, it's sort of like that's kind of an abstract concept, but those are kinds of the things I think about. I think the exception would be if, again, it's like a very specific role and you're looking for someone who has some experience doing something that's kind of niche. But for the most part on my team, people are fairly generalist just because of the things that we're working across. And also like looking for different perspectives. I want to make sure that, we have people who have all different kinds of ideas, life experiences coming into the group, because I'm trying to build the product discipline up in my company because it is fairly unique. And so I want people to be able to evangelize for that. And I think, bring curiosity and diligence.
Well, I wanted to touch on that later, but you brought it up now. Since product is like a newer function at Random House, can you talk about, working with probably more traditional people who don't necessarily understand what product does and what that's like?
Yeah, sure. There has historically always been like more of a project management organization that works primarily on a lot of our like B2B major systems, things like that. So I think they had adopted sort of agile processes, years ago, and I think so that that sort of like concept of like iterative work and agile was something that was relatively sort of known, but the idea of like what a product manager does for sure was fairly unique. And so a piece of it was just really trying to get the organization of our groups right. And it took a couple years and was through partnerships with like senior leaders on the technology side and the design side and really kind of developing that process more. So then we could actually show that we've organized groups because our the product portfolio is sort of diverse around kind of like inputs, and so we could do parallel work and get a lot more done as opposed to having these really difficult prioritization conversations around things that are apples and oranges. How do you prioritize, a change to something that affects loyalty members with a marketing, new feature and a marketing tool? So just getting the org structure right and then being able to show the results is really key. And then also a lot of it was showing up to, big stakeholder meetings and things with tools or frameworks to help people kind of orient the way they think or work in a way that's more akin to what we're trying to do. And I think it's just a slow process.
So was it helpful? Did you have leadership that was kind of bullish on this from the beginning, or was it more of a process of slow incremental victories to kind of win people over on having a tech forward kind of position?
Yeah, I think it helps that leadership is bought in. Our CMO is very excited about all of that and very supportive, and she leads our group. So that that really helps. I think yeah, I would say I'm trying to think of the best way to sort of encapsulate that. I think part of it is just showing results a little bit, and I think there was a little bit of leeway to be able to, like I was fortunate to be able to kind of shape the discipline, so understand what the concerns are, right? Understand what the key objectives were, and then try to sort of organize a structure and a plan to show how we could actually show results, build in iteration, testing, all kinds of things. It took a while to sort of build out, and invest in some of the tools and functionality that we would need, to build up like our user research practice, for instance, or our testing practice, things like that. So.
Yeah, and I think this is really like a living example of tech no longer being a vertical; it's really a horizontal. And I never expected Penguin House to have such a robust product org, and seeing that is really interesting.
Yeah, I would say like, yeah, it's not, when I talk to people, they're always a little bit surprised, and it's like, no, there's because you wouldn't necessarily think of it. It's totally understandable. I think I should have said this too. One of the first major efforts was really around sort of, and this, I wasn't involved in this project that sort of predated me, was really this email engine that, in collaboration with data science teams and engineering teams and our email ops teams, was able to basically send millions of emails, to very segmented groups based on key attributes, very expediently. And that was a huge investment as we were building out our consumer database. And so seeing something like that and the results of it, the fact that we could build automated email programs that, we publish hundreds of books a month. So like on every given month, we can build seed audiences and send push a title, like an individual title that we think, if we know enough about you, is going to meet your needs. Like that's amazing from a marketing perspective, and that's like a value add that we can, that the technology,
right.
the investment in the technology is able to deliver on. So.
Right, and that's the importance of having that in-house.
Yeah.
So let's take a few questions from the audience here. So starting from the top, at organizations with new product organizations, when someone asks you to explain what you do, how do you explain product management?
That's a great question. I think it's super specific, probably on some level, to like what the objective of the organization is. So just speaking from my own experience, since it's primarily been centered around consumer product, I think it's just as simple as trying to say like, I'm here to kind of balance out all of the different objectives we have, but make sure that we're representing the voice of the customer, make sure that we're working kind of in a smart, effective way, that we're using all kinds of diverse data sources to validate what we're trying to do, so that we're doing the right thing, so that you sort of like business stakeholder can meet, your objectives, and we can kind of move forward. So just kind of keeping all of those things aligned.
In mind, yes. Yeah. Cool. Next question here. How do you identify those apple to orange moments that make you realize you might need a dedicated structure for a set of problems?
Sure. I think it helps when you have a lot of conflicts and you're having a lot of conversations around what should we do, why are we doing this now? We certainly had that just based on kind of a legacy way that we had built the team and had resourced things, and we were finding that like, if we were building like that marketing platform from scratch, right? That's a massive effort, and so we recruited as many of our engineers, and design resources to build that out, and then we were neglecting, not just like continuous investment in the consumer-facing like web properties that see millions of visitors every month, but also like those opportunities for like seeing where quickly, being reactive in a good way. So if you're noticing something, like trying to capitalize on that and scale it, or something's not working, trying to quickly figure it out, all the things that we talked about here, the last few days. And so just being able to show clearly like, hey, this isn't working. We're neglecting all of this. So then trying to think through like, is it a resource problem? Is it an organizational problem? Is it both? Like, do we not have the right criteria for prioritizing work? How do we standardize that? So we've tried a handful of things with that regard. We've thought about opportunity assessments, like trying to do more quarterly planning, having people kind of model out and justify, thinking through things like cost of inaction, like level of effort, all of the different kind of key inputs that may help. That was one thing we thought through. So it's sort of a mix of all of those things.
How often would you say you kind of have that assessment moment?
We've tried to do it at least twice a year, and then in the practical sense, it's like you sort of get focused on one area, and then things organically kind of come up, or things change. So, like I mentioned, I think yesterday, 2 years ago at the start of the pandemic, we were asked to explore what it would mean to build a little bit more of a robust, not like a major one, but explore e-commerce a little bit more. That was never on the radar. So then all those plans go out the window, and we had to sort of be really nimble. So it's sort of a little bit of both.
Well, actually, I wanted to touch on that too.
Yeah.
So in terms of COVID-19, you and I had spoken a little bit over the phone. I'd love for them to hear, how that shaped product for you at Penguin House, and what opportunities or non-opportunities kind of developed out of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first one was adapting, like a lot of people have talked about, to being remote. We were able to expand our teams with folks outside of the New York area, which was really exciting and encouraging, and that's here to stay. So just adapting our working styles, and also feeling reassured that we actually had fairly good processes in place, because there wasn't a lot of disruption. It was just, okay, now we're on Slack or Teams instead of all having to stand up in a physical room together. So that was just the first thing. But the other area from a business perspective was this sort of call it e-commerce, because that's what it is, e-commerce moment where, our objective is just to have consumers buy our books from anywhere. We're happy if and when that happens. So it was never a priority to sell directly, but we did have that capability, and it seemed really interesting because we knew that we could fulfill the orders. We had processes in place in our warehouses where they were safe. We had stock. And so it was just a moment to really learn about that, and we're continuing to think through what that means and how to infuse that into our product offering, change processes across the organization. So that's been really motivating too, because it's a completely new business problem for folks on the team to think about.
Right, and yeah, for us at MindBody, when we had our product at the company and COVID-19 hit, obviously as a technology company that's selling to brick and mortar, there was a lot of headwinds there because all the businesses closed. But once they reopened, there was actually a lot of opportunity around our product because it was around text messaging. So we quickly realized that the waiting room was gone for a long time, and so we needed to develop new solutions at the time. So one of the things that we developed very quickly was ability to actually check into your appointments through the AI, through text messaging, while you were waiting in the car. So being able to kind of adapt your product quickly and see where there might be opportunity in potentially, obviously, an awful situation is really important, because our customers ended up loving us that much more because we were able to respond to their needs in real time. So
yeah, and we're fortunate because we have a wonderful consumer insights group in our team, and they're doing so much market research, really understanding how consumer needs and behavior have changed so much, which significant changes over the last 2 years. So even things like leaning into brand, which was interesting, and that's a really sort of hot topic in our group a little bit, because on some level it's our brands are authors, and that's fantastic, and then we have different publishing imprints, so thinking about what that means. But from a consumer perspective, being maybe more choosy about where you're spending your money, looking for certain things in terms of a brand's value proposition being expressed clearly, especially in the e-commerce space. We've been talking a lot about that and what that could mean.
So did that lead you to emphasize the Penguin brand more, or the individual author brands?
We're still sort of working through that, to be honest. I think we've got teams that are thinking through that. We're just trying to think through what's the story we can tell consumers about. Again, we're not trying to emphasize our direct sales, but what would that be? Is there what? And trying to understand honestly from consumers why they're choosing to buy directly from us too. Is it that they feel closer to the author? There's lots of reasons and things like that.
Cool.
Yeah.
And so let's go to the next question here. How do you measure your own growth as a PM, since many of the essential skills are soft skills?
Yeah, That's a tough
a good
question.
one.
Yeah, that's almost like that's a stumper. Who has the no? It's, I was like
Reveal yourself.
Yeah, well, only because I may need to think a little bit more about it and get back to you. I would say, I'm just trying to like always ask for feedback from people, peers, my direct reports, anybody. I think you should always be open to that. So part of it is like understanding for me, like what's going on in real time and how I can, improve or make a change or continue to do something that's working well. And then part of it is like really trying to respond to changes in strategy for the company and think through like how can I continue to add value, where can I sharpen things. So one thing we're talking a lot about now with our analytics team is how do we work to more precisely size opportunities so we can maybe be a little bit more responsive if we want to try to grow certain areas or grow conversion on in different aspects, and so that's like an area where I would say even personally like that's a growth area that would be really exciting to be able to sharpen that a little bit more, and then how can I also work with my team to build that out. So like we have team meetings and most of the time it's having folks from internally or even externally come and like talk about something, a framework, how can we kind of collectively build our skills. So I feel like for me, it's always kind of deliberate in that way.
Yeah, so I had the same question for how you measure your team.
Yeah.
So if you could speak to that, like how do you see them develop? Like how do you measure a good one versus a bad PM?
Yeah, I think like everybody's individual and unique. We have our sort of review process is actually like we use the retrospective framework company-wide, which is really great, and it happens multiple times a year. So it's really about setting crisp, time-bound like goals to think through, very concrete things. And I try to be as transparent as possible in terms of like where promotion opportunities come up when they can come up. So it's about like how do we build a case to get you to the next level? Like what are those tangible things that you can do? What do you want to do? And sometimes there are things that come up or opportunities that come up out of the blue that I would never have imagined, like this e-commerce thing that I keep talking about. So it's like, how do I find somebody on the team who maybe would be an interesting fit, who's never really had deep experience there, but that's like a great growth opportunity? Or, is it hard skills? Is it new technologies that people want to learn? Is it about having more visibility across the organization? Because we also are international, so we've got counterparts, all over the world. So is it like being able to, I had someone on my team give a presentation, we're owned by Bertelsmann in Germany, about like she built, we have a children's a website, a content marketing vertical that's focused on children's books, and we recently launched a shop there because we thought that there was a need to create a space where anybody looking for kids' books could go and do like faceting by sort of different topics to just like find a really great fit based on reading level, all kinds of things that are hard to sort of find. And so she, it seemed like a great opportunity after having spent like a year or more like researching and building this thing from the ground up, like to go present that. So it's like that was a great growth opportunity. Just trying to source those things for people.
Yeah. So if you take a look at your PMs, not to choose favorites,
Yeah.
but if you were to pick in your head like your top performing ones, what qualities do you think they have that makes them the best?
I think, having empathy for the consumer and also for colleagues, really understanding, because a lot of this goes back to the conversation yesterday about influence, but a lot of what I expect is like leading through influence, which means, in my view, working collaboratively to sort of achieve the same result, and in many ways leading that effort, whether it's like motivating people, constantly providing context. So being well-rounded enough to, be able to sort of steer that and steer through difficult times while, still maintaining sort of positivity, not like toxic positivity, but like appropriate levels, and being able to encourage people to sort of do their best work, right? Understand, okay, everybody has a really clear role to play in this, so not being too prescriptive, things like that. Asking questions, being curiosity.
Right, and I think, with PMs especially, you're leading without any direct authority over any of the teams that you're normally assigned to, so having that ability to influence people without them hating you for your positivity or negativity is a delicate balance.
Exactly, yeah. And like being able to answer, being prepared, right? Being able to answer all the questions or saying, hey, I don't know the answer, I'll get back to you. Saying no has come up a lot. Saying no, but why, or being open to considering possibilities, even if the answer is never, making sure it's not heard that way, so.
Yeah, so the next question I did not have in mind when going into this, but I am very curious. Where do you go after head of product?
Oh boy, I don't know. I mean, I'm always looking for opportunities to, challenge myself and grow. It could be in, different businesses. There could be hopefully great opportunities in my current company. Maybe it's slightly different function. I had not really had experience like in marketing groups before because I'd worked primarily in media companies on like more of the content product side. So that's an area of interest. I don't know.
So
I guess stay
you're open.
tuned, I guess, yeah.
You love your job.
Yeah,
that's
I do
the
love my
point.
job, yeah. Especially
That is the
we're
goal
on camera.
in and of itself.
Yeah.
And so I also wanted to turn attention to kind of your best practices when developing a product. So far we've talked about, your personal history, the team, but when you're out there in the field trying to make that product happen, what do you think is important to keep in mind there?
Sure. I think having diverse sets of data to go to, really having like a very clear problem that you're trying to solve and a hypothesis that you can validate, but not overly investing in that where you're just like failure to launch, getting started. So not overly relying on one data source or the other, having a well-rounded mix to understand. Like those would be a few things that would come to mind.
Cool. And then when you're kind of out there, we're done.
I think
Sorry.
we're
Okay. I was looking for
There's a lot more.
Yeah, and I don't want.
I didn't have any like red light. So.
I know. I'm the red light.
There's the,
Okay,
the music.
So everyone, another round of applause for our
Thank you.
fireside
Thank you.
chat.
I was pretty much at the end then.
Thanks.